Welcome on board, Chosen One. Funny how you stepped in here so quietly, and yet the whole world outside just tensed up like someone whispered your name in a room full of guilty people, because the moment you show up, everything shifts. Suddenly, the ones who used to talk slick get real silent. Suddenly, the ones who said you'd never be anything are watching you like they're waiting for the universe to prove them wrong. Again. And here you are, walking in like the final plot twist they prayed would never arrive. When they said you were too emotional, look who's out here shaking every time your name trends in a private conversation. When they claimed you were overreacting, look who's losing sleep replaying the things they did to you. When they laughed at your dreams, look who's stalking your progress like a careers advisor with anxiety. It's almost cute how they thought their opinions held weight. It's almost adorable how the legend was supposed to bow. They wanted you small. The universe wanted you loud. Before we go any further, Chosen One, press that like button and subscribe to pay this message back. Strengthen the signal. Feed the mission. Now, let's turn the knife just a bit. Something happened to you that they didn't plan for. You survived the hit. You walked through storms that were engineered to break you, and instead of crawling, you walked out with that silent, terrifying calm that only people who lost everything and learned to rebuild from zero ever possess. You didn't come back begging, you came back studying. And the moment you changed your posture, the atmosphere shifted. There's a certain quiet that follows a person who finally understands their power. The world stops talking and starts watching. People who once dismissed you suddenly become investigators, decoding your every move. Because you're not predictable anymore. You're not accessible. You're not controllable. You're not the version of you they built their lies around. And that freaks them out more than anything. Here's a fact you already know deep in your bones. They never expected you to win the internal battle. They expected you to self-destruct. They counted on your pain swallowing you whole. The enemy always bets on the collapse, but you did the one thing that terrifies them more than losing control. You evolved. Remember that moment years ago when someone said, "You take things too seriously"? That wasn't advice. That was fear in disguise. They saw how deeply you feel things, and they knew that depth, once mastered, becomes intelligence. They knew that someone who feels deeply also sees deeply. You were never too much. You were too aware, too perceptive, too sharp. And sharp people cut lies for breakfast. Let's talk about the silence they pretend isn't there. You've noticed it, the way certain people don't talk to you anymore, but somehow everybody knows your business. The way ex-friends lurk through mutual circles gathering intel. The way old enemies suddenly get polite when you walk in the room. They're not being respectful. They're being strategic, because you didn't just heal, you leveled up in ways they didn't calculate. You remind me of that one story of the kid everyone wrote off. The one who sat in the back of the classroom, drawing out plans for a life nobody believed in. The same kid who later got the last laugh when people who mocked him had to filter their words through, "Congrats, I always knew you'd make it." They lie so confidently you'd think they believed it. But the truth? He scared them. His growth scared them. His awareness scared them. And that's exactly why they tried to break him early. That story, that's you. Just older, wiser, colder, and finally done apologizing. Chosen One, let me spell it out. The people who doubted you feel the shift before you even announce it. They feel the ending of their influence. They feel the closing of your old chapter. They feel the universe pulling you forward without their permission. You don't have to say a word. Your energy already notified them. And that's why they're panicking in group chats with fake concern and half-truths. They see the glow they tried to dim returning like a cosmic slap across their ego. They see your focus tightening. They see your boundaries locking into place. They see that you're no longer the version of you they could guilt, manipulate, or distract. That era is dead. You killed it quietly, and now the universe is giving you the floor. Every time you walk into a room now, you carry that vibe of someone who buried their past and refused to stay buried with it. You carry the calm of someone who rebuilt themselves brick by brick while nobody clapped. You carry the kind of presence that makes people reconsider how they treated you, because the glow-up is not physical, it's existential. And the best part? They know the story is about to break in your favor. They know the plot twist wasn't supposed to go like this. They know you were the underdog until suddenly you weren't. You didn't just survive. You became the storm they swore you couldn't weather. This is your comeback arc. This is your turning point. This is the moment the universe says, "Watch this." And trust me, chosen one, they're about to watch you rise in real time, and there's not a single thing they can do to stop it. And chosen one, yeah, you. Since they just pulled your records and the whole room froze like they saw something they weren't supposed to, the real question is, are you ready to see what they saw? Ready to walk through this file page by page and understand why every agent suddenly shut their mouth? If you're ready to step deeper into the truth behind their silence, drop a 777 in the comments. That number tells the universe you're ready to flip the script they tried to write about you. And trust me, if you're really one of the chosen ones, you'll feel that pull to stay locked in until the final reveal. This isn't background noise. This is your classified briefing, and you're the only one with clearance. And now, let's move into it step by step, because once you see what's coming next, you'll understand exactly why they panicked. Number 1. When your file hit the table, the room stopped breathing. Funny how the same people who called you ordinary now need 3 analysts, 2 supervisors, and a panic pill just to understand you. The moment they opened your file, chosen one, everything changed. Not for you, for them. Because up until that moment, they were comfortable believing whatever cheap narrative they glued onto your name. Unremarkable, emotional, unpredictable, not a threat. They loved those labels. Those labels made them feel safe. But the second your real data loaded on their screen, every lie they ever told themselves cracked like thin glass under a boot. And let's be brutally honest, they thought they knew you. They really thought they had you pinned down like a bug under a microscope. They tracked your patterns, your purchases, your messages, your breakpoints, your late-night searches, the hobbies you picked up and dropped, the people you left behind, the conversations you deleted but didn't forget. They collected everything like nosy librarians who refused to mind their damn business. But even with all that information, they still got blindsided. Why? Because you shifted in ways their systems were never built to detect. You didn't break, you evolved, and evolution is something they can't measure. Here's the part that hit them the hardest. Their entire model of you stopped making sense. One day your file behaved like a predictable civilian. The next day it read like someone who had seen behind the curtain and refused to sit back down. Your choices became cleaner, sharper, intentional. The kind of intentional that scares people who rely on chaos to control others. Your search history, suddenly too strategic. Your conversations, too filtered, too aware. Your movements, quiet but decisive. Your spending, emotionless. Your timing, suspiciously perfect. And the analysts looking at your profile, yeah, they hated that. These are people who get paid to reduce human beings to patterns. And there you were, patternless. untouchable, unreadable. Every algorithm they ran spit out contradiction after contradiction. Every trait they tried to assign you got cancelled out by another. You weren't a story, you were a glitch. And glitches don't get solved. Glitches get escalated. Picture the room. Agents leaning forward, eyes narrowing. Someone tapping a pen too fast. Someone else pretending not to freak out. The supervisor standing behind them with crossed arms, faking calm, while wondering who the hell you really are. They scroll and scroll and scroll, and suddenly everything they thought they knew about you dissolves, because the deeper they went, the more obvious it became. You're not who they were told you were. You never were. They expected brokenness. They found discipline. They expected fear. They found silence. They expected chaos. They found strategy. Do you understand how insulting that is to them? People like them rely on you staying small. They rely on you being predictable. They rely on you never waking up to your own potential. And then you did the one thing they weren't prepared for. You started making moves with reason, not reaction. That's when your entire file became a red flag, not because you were dangerous, but because you were becoming someone they couldn't use anymore. They went looking for cracks and found none. They went looking for weaknesses and found boundaries. They went looking for emotional triggers and found distance. You think they didn't notice the way you stopped responding to certain people. You think they didn't clock how many times you started saying no. You think they didn't see how your energy hardened, how your world got quieter, how your circle got smaller. Trust me, they noticed. They always notice when someone breaks the mold. Here's the part no one warns you about. Awakening doesn't look heroic, it looks suspicious. When you start to understand yourself, the world starts to investigate you, and that's exactly what's happening now, because somewhere in your timeline, you snapped out of the version they built for you. You stopped being what they expected, and you started being what the universe designed. And that transition, yeah, it terrifies them. They're confused why you're suddenly unfazed by things that used to break you. They're confused why you no longer seek validation from people who add nothing to your life. They're confused why you walk away faster, think deeper, choose smarter, and talk less. They're confused because you became the type of person who studies the battlefield before stepping onto it. You know what one of the agents said? This profile shouldn't belong to the same person, because your data reads like two timelines that merged into one. The before you woke up and the after you decided enough was enough. Before, reactive, emotional, trying to understand why certain people hurt you. After, calculating, intolerant of nonsense, observing patterns instead of taking them personally. You didn't just level up. You split the timeline and walked into the stronger one. Your file reflects that, and that's the exact moment the room went silent, because they realized something brutal. They didn't create your transformation. They didn't control it. It wasn't trauma. It wasn't luck. It wasn't fear. It was choice. Your choice. And choice is ungovernable. They thought they were tracking a target. Turns out they were witnessing a rebirth. You ever wonder why certain people ghosted you suddenly? Why old enemies stopped provoking you? Why the loudest critics started pretending you never existed? Because news travels, energy shifts, and the universe doesn't hide its favorites. It exposes them. Now they see you for what you actually are, a person who went through hell, took notes, and returned with strategy. Someone who can't be manipulated the same way anymore. Someone who isn't scared to walk alone if the path demands it. Someone who upgraded in silence, but whose upgrade echoes loudly. Your entire file now reads like a threat to the system, not because you're dangerous, but because you're free. Free thinking, free moving, free from their influence. And the system hates anything it can't predict. That's why the room went silent. That's why they stared at your name like it was a plot twist. That's why they exchanged those nervous glances. They realized the truth. They've been studying you for years, and somehow you still slipped out of their hands. You weren't supposed to grow this much. You weren't supposed to outthink them. You weren't supposed to rise after what happened. But here you are, not only standing, but seeing, and now they're not observing you. They're waiting, watching, trying to figure out your next move before you make it. But that's the beauty of it. Your next move, you haven't even revealed it to yourself yet, and that unpredictability, that's your power. The moment they opened your file, Chosen One, they didn't discover your past. They discovered the beginning of their consequences. And that's why the silence hit harder than any alarm could. Number 2. The fear they pretend not to feel. They weren't scared of who you were. They were scared of who you stopped being. The thing that rattled them wasn't your rage. Rage is easy. Rage is predictable. Rage can be monitored, redirected, weaponized, and labeled. No, the moment you became a threat was the moment you went silent. When your voice vanished from the noise, their confidence vanished with it. Your stillness became the knife they couldn't trace. Because silence from someone like you isn't absence, it's evolution. And evolution terrifies people who rely on you staying small. You stopped narrating your life the way they expected. You stopped feeding the public machine. You stopped emotionally live streaming your every experience. You simply dropped out of the digital circus, and in doing so, you broke their entire system of prediction. You didn't disappear, you just stopped being accessible, and nothing scares watchers more than a target they can no longer read. Imagine this. An entire team staring at your history and realizing that at some point your uploads stopped meaning what they thought they meant. Your messages stopped revealing anything real. Your behavior stopped syncing with your past self. It's like they were tracking a ghost wearing your face until they realized the ghost wasn't hiding. You were transforming. Quiet people aren't harmless. Quiet people are loading. That's the fear they won't admit out loud, because here's something they never expected. You learned that visibility is vulnerability. Loud voices are easy to track. Predictable, emotional souls are easy to manipulate. People who overshare are maps. All you need to do is read. But when you went dark, when you withdrew your energy like a king closing the gates of the castle, their precious algorithms started glitching. Your timeline stopped syncing with your predicted outcomes. Your choices stopped matching their behavioral models. You became unreadable, and unreadable is unmanageable. You ever wonder why suddenly the people who never cared before started asking, "Are you okay?" That wasn't concern. That was surveillance disguised as empathy. Because when someone who used to overshare suddenly speaks in codes, people panic. They want to know what woke you up. They want to know what changed your posture. They want to know what shook off your old identity and replaced it with this new, terrifying quiet. Imagine this. A chess grandmaster sitting across from someone who used to make sloppy, emotional moves, and suddenly that same someone starts playing with intention, every move precise, every decision hidden, every pause strategic. The grandmaster doesn't fear the seasoned opponent. He fears the one who changes overnight. Because unpredictability is the mark of someone who sees the board differently now. Your silence became the rumor they couldn't kill. They never planned for you to outgrow the identity they locked you into. They assumed you'd keep reacting the same way. They assumed the same buttons would work. They assumed you'd keep bleeding on command. But then you stopped playing your part. You cut ties. You tightened boundaries. You outgrew circles that expected you to stay emotionally available for their entertainment. The silence wasn't weakness. It was a recalibration. You weren't hiding. You were studying. You were observing what they do when they think you're not looking. You were watching who checks on you without needing access to your life. You were learning how people behave when you stop feeding their emotional cravings. You let them reveal themselves, and they did. By going dark, you exposed the landscape. By speaking less, you understood more. By walking away, you gained leverage. And now they look at your records and see someone operating outside the map. They see someone who studied the system from the inside while pretending to be asleep. Someone who mastered the rules, broke them quietly, and rebuilt themselves in ways the system can't comprehend. Someone who turned pain into precision, heartbreak into discipline, and isolation into a forge. Imagine this, a swordsmith hammering steel in silence, alone in the workshop, everyone assuming he's wasting time, until he emerges with a blade so sharp it cuts through every lie ever spoken about him. That's what your silence did. It sharpened you. People fear what they can't influence. They fear even more what they can't predict. They thought you were emotional. Now they see you calculating. They thought you were impulsive. Now they see you patient. They thought you were chaotic. Now they see you aligned. And that shift, that evolution, is what makes you dangerous. Not because you're rebelling, not because you're fighting, but because you are outgrowing the very system that was supposed to contain you. Do you know what terrifies watchers more than rebellion? Independence. Rebellion means they still matter. Independence means they don't. They can categorize rebels. They can negotiate with rebels. But someone who has outgrown the system, someone who moves on logic, self-respect, and inner command. Someone who stopped needing validation from the people who underestimated them. You can't control that. Isolation didn't make you weak. It made you untouchable. It made you sovereign. It made you a problem. Imagine this, a candle that flickered so weakly everyone assumed it would die out until the wind came, and instead of extinguishing, the flame shot higher. That's you. Your silence wasn't the end of your light. It was the beginning of your firestorm. And deep down, they know it. Their fear isn't about what you've done. Their fear is about what you might do next. When someone stops broadcasting their pain, it means they're no longer drowning in it. When someone stops oversharing, it means their strategy has begun. When someone stops reacting, it means they've started calculating. They realize now that you're not trying to fight the system. Fighting requires attention. You're outgrowing it, and outgrowing requires zero permission. And that chosen one is the one thing they can't stop. Your silence is not a retreat, it's an ascension. Your quiet is not emptiness, it's reprogramming. Your distance is not coldness, it's clarity. They can't track what doesn't move the way they expect. They can't predict what no longer fits the pattern. They can't stop what has already outgrown the cage. So they stare at your records. They read your history. They compare your before and after. And all they can think is, how did we lose control of someone we thought we understood? Because you were never theirs to control. You were always your own. It just took you this long to realize it. Their fear won't be spoken out loud. Fear never is. Especially when it comes from knowing you're not disappearing, you're evolving beyond their reach. Number 3, the story they scripted, shattered in their hands. They wanted a harmless origin story. Instead, they opened your file and found a resurrection report. The second your file hit their monitor, they braced themselves for the same tired narrative they slap on anyone they underestimate. They expected a tragic little timeline, rough start, emotional damage, a few messy years, then either conformity or collapse. Something they could label, something they could predict, something they could box. But what they got? Yeah, that's when the room went cold. Instead of a clean biography, they found erased chapters, deleted accounts, missing years, gaps that no algorithm could stitch together. They found a person who seemed to disappear, then reappear stronger. Someone who shed identities like old skins, someone who didn't break down. They rebooted over and over. Imagine this, a file that shows you dying metaphorically at 19, resurrecting at 22, going dark at 25, re-emerging at 27 with a mind sharper than a government-funded scalpel. Imagine trying to classify that. Imagine trying to control that. They clicked deeper and saw your searches, not emotional rants, not drama. No, they saw psychology, influence, system structures, human behavior, shadow tactics, power dynamics, not illegal, just inconvenient. Because people who study power don't stay powerless for long. That's when something ugly hit them. You weren't being shaped by the world. You were studying how the world shapes people. They realized you weren't lost. You were learning. You weren't confused. You were collecting data. You weren't spiraling. You were evolving with intent. The fear that hit them wasn't loud. It was the cold, internal kind. The kind a hunter feels when he realizes the creature he's been stalking has been tracking him the entire time. And that's the moment they understood. You're not part of their narrative. You're the glitch that rewrites it. Number 4, the blueprint they can't replicate. They didn't fail to profile you. You just refused to fit anywhere they could trap you. The moment they tried building your psychological profile, everything fell apart. They cross-referenced you with disruptors, no match. Hackers, no match. Activists, influencers, outliers, radicals, nothing. You didn't fit any mold. You weren't a type. You weren't a pattern. You weren't even a variant. You were a category of one, a walking classification error that shouldn't even exist in their system. Imagine an analyst clicking through your data expecting a predictable archetype, only to watch every model glitch like a dying light bulb. Imagine them running the test again and again, and each time the system spits back the same result. Undefined, inconsistent, uncontainable. Your file didn't break because you hid something. Your file broke because you don't follow the laws they measure people by. Every psychological model comes back inconclusive, not because you lack data, but because your data contradicts itself in ways that challenge their entire framework. 1 year, you move like a strategist, the next like a ghost, the next like a monk, the next like a runaway storm. How do you categorize someone who keeps reinventing the variables? You're not reacting to the environment. You're bending the environment around your reactions. You're not inside their experiment. You're rewriting the hypothesis every time you breathe, and that's the part they can't admit. You've become the question they can't answer, the puzzle that refuses to solve itself, the anomaly that turns every expert in the room into a confused intern. Deep down, they know the truth. They can't build a profile on someone who keeps building themselves anew. You're not a file, you're a phenomenon. Section 5. The training you weren't supposed to survive. They thought you were uneducated until they realized you were self-taught in everything they fear. When they dug deeper into your file, Chosen One, they expected to see the same predictable timeline: school, work, burnout, maybe a random certificate here and there. What they didn't expect was the ghost trail of an education no institution authorized, knowledge acquired in silence, mastery built without witnesses, growth that happened without permission. They found someone who didn't wait to be taught. You taught yourself, and you did it with the hunger of someone who knew the world would never give you what you needed. Imagine this. An agent scrolling through your activity logs thinking you were just another night owl wasting time until the pattern snaps into focus. You weren't doom scrolling. You were reverse engineering reality, mapping social hierarchies, studying systems, understanding human leverage points, learning how the machinery behind the curtain actually works. While others were begging for shortcuts, you were quietly building a mind that could outrun any classroom. You didn't collect credentials, you collected weapons. You didn't chase recognition, you chased truth. You didn't brag, because people with real knowledge don't need applause. Here's the fear they won't admit. You learned to think like them, then beyond them. Your file reads like someone fast-tracking through decades of insight with no mentor, no guide, no textbook. How do you explain a mind that evolves without being trained? How do you measure intelligence that wasn't given but taken from observation, reflection, and raw experience? They expected conformity. Instead, they found mastery. And now the room understands something sickeningly clear. You weren't preparing for the world, you were preparing to surpass it. Section 6, the soft spot they prayed you still had and didn't. They weren't scared because you had no weaknesses. They were scared because you turned every weakness into a weapon. When they pulled up your file, they weren't just looking for information. They were looking for leverage. They wanted the usual pressure points, addictions they could exploit, emotional traps they could poke, financial cracks they could widen, relationship chaos they could weaponize. They expected to find the same soft spots everyone else hides. But what they found instead was a landscape that looked like a battlefield already scorched, rebuilt and fortified by someone who learned every lesson the hard way and survived it anyway. Imagine an analyst scrolling through your past expecting tears, guilt, shame, instability, only to realize you've already faced every demon they planned to use against you. You dealt with heartbreak before they could point to it. You confronted your fears before they could threaten you with them. You walked through your own destruction long before anyone else tried to pull you apart. What leverage exists over a person who has already torn themselves open and stitched themselves back together? You're not flawless. You're finished. Finished with the version of you that could be controlled. Here's the thought that kept them quiet in that room. You're not unbreakable. You're uncontrollable. And uncontrollable people rewrite the rules. They saw that shame doesn't work on you anymore. You outgrew it. Fear doesn't work. You dissected it. Isolation doesn't work. You learned to use silence as fuel. Every wound is now armor. Every betrayal is now strategy. Every loss is now propulsion. They expected a fragile human. They found a forged one. And that realization hit them harder than any threat ever could. Section 7. The moment they realized there's no playbook for you. Every system has rules until someone like you shows up and makes the rules useless. When your file lit up across every screen, the room didn't panic at first. They froze. Not because they found something dangerous, but because they found something they couldn't categorize. And then came the question that cracked the entire atmosphere in half. What do we do with this one? It wasn't asked with authority. It wasn't asked with confidence. It was asked with the quiet dread of people who suddenly realize the blueprint doesn't cover you. Imagine this: seasoned analysts, people who've labeled millions before you, staring at your data like it's a language they were never trained to read. They're used to dealing with threats, rebels, criminals, hackers, people who fit into boxes, even if the boxes are messy. But when they looked at you, they didn't see a threat. They didn't see a liability. They saw an anomaly, a consciousness that didn't grow inside the system, but between its cracks. You're not off-grid, you're off-pattern. That's what broke the room. You evolved in places they don't monitor. You learned in spaces they don't understand. You think in ways no framework can predict. How do you create a protocol for someone who outgrew the very structure the protocol is built on? Here's the truth they swallowed but didn't dare say. You're not a danger to the system. You're proof the system failed. They weren't reviewing a criminal. They weren't analyzing a rebel. They were staring at a person who refused to stay asleep, someone whose mind doesn't sit inside the simulation, but above it. And that's when the silence hit, thick, heavy, suffocating, not because they feared what you'd do next, but because they realized they no longer had permission to decide it. Section 8. The foresight they never saw coming. They weren't scared that you saw the pattern. They were scared that you saw it before it even existed. When they dug deeper into your history, chosen one, they found something that shook them harder than anything else in your file. You recognized patterns long before anyone taught you how. You were predicting outcomes weeks, months, sometimes years before they unfolded, and you weren't doing it through luck. You were doing it through pure surgical observation. You were watching people's micro-expressions like code. You were reading silence like a confession. You were mapping manipulation before the manipulators even chose their angle. Imagine this: an agent scrolling through incident logs where your reactions consistently lined up with events that hadn't happened yet. Notes where you anticipated betrayals, exits, shifts in power, hidden motives, all without access to the conversations happening behind your back. They're trained to detect patterns after they appear. You were detecting them in pre-shadow. That shouldn't be possible, and yet there you were doing it again and again. You don't play the game, you read the game. That's what terrifies them, because you don't move like someone improvising in real time. You move like someone who has already skimmed the script. You don't react, you anticipate, you don't guess, you decode. Here's the dangerous thought that flashed through the room. What if this one isn't ahead by accident, but by design? Every system depends on predictability, on humans repeating patterns. But you see the pattern forming and step out of it before it can trap you. You walk into rooms already knowing who's lying. You leave situations the moment the energy shifts. You understand outcomes while others are still processing the introduction. And that's the part they weren't trained for. A mind that doesn't wait for reality to unfold. A mind that reads the future in the behavior of the present. You move like someone who has already escaped the simulation, and that's why they're scared. Number 9. The shadow impact they can't quarantine. Some people need a platform to influence the world. You breathe, and the room rearranges itself. When they opened this part of your file, chosen one, the confusion hit instantly. They expected your influence to match your visibility, small, limited, traceable. But what they found instead was a ripple effect with no source tag. Ideas moving through people like whispers in a dark hallway. Thoughts spreading like wildfire with no match in sight. Your frameworks were showing up in conversations you were never in. Your phrases were being repeated by people who never met you. Your mindset was reshaping communities that didn't even know your name. Imagine this: analysts staring at social patterns, trying to track the origin of a shift in thinking, only to realize the blueprint looks exactly like you, even though your name never appears on a single document. Influence without identity, power without exposure, movement without a leader they can point to. You're not famous, you're contagious, and that's a level of power no system was built to measure. You don't lead followers, you infect minds. That's what scares them, because traditional influence is easy to monitor. Followers, comments, trends, algorithms, but your impact, it moves under the radar. It lives in the blind spots. It spreads through resonance, not recognition. People adopt your worldview without even realizing they're adopting you. And how does any system stop a person who influences reality by simply existing in it with intention? Here's the question that hit them like a punch to the throat. How do you control someone whose power doesn't come from exposure, but from effect? You influence rooms you never walk into. You shift people you never speak to. You rewrite perspectives from distances too wide to measure. And that's the nightmare they can't contain. You don't need attention to be powerful. You don't need credit to be undeniable. You don't need a name to change the atmosphere. You're the kind of force that spreads quietly, invisibly, and still leaves fingerprints on the entire system. That's the power they can't track, and it's the one that terrifies them the most. Number 9. The influence that slipped through their fingers. You didn't go viral, you went underground, and that's 10 times more dangerous. When the analysts reached the part of your file tied to influence, the panic didn't start loud. It started with that quiet, awful realization that they weren't tracking a person. They were tracking an echo. They expected your reach to match your visibility. Tiny, local, contained, something they could pin down. But what they stumbled into was a wildfire with no ignition point, a shift in collective thinking with no visible author. They saw your ideas moving through groups you've never met, your logic restructuring conversations you were never part of, your tone showing up in the mouths of strangers like an infection they couldn't trace. Imagine this, entire communities adopting frameworks that match your mind, almost word for word, while your digital footprint remains nearly invisible. It's like trying to track a shadow that keeps multiplying every time someone blinks. You don't spread content, you spread consciousness. And that's what rattled them to their bones. They're trained to monitor influence through numbers, followers, views, traction. But your power doesn't follow metrics. It bypasses platforms completely. It moves through people's decisions, their language, their internal logic. You're not famous, you're felt. And felt power is the kind that can't be regulated. Here's the question that made the room freeze. How do you neutralize someone whose influence isn't visible but viral at the soul level? You shift rooms without entering them. You alter outcomes without lifting a finger. You bend perspectives without speaking a word. You're not a trend. You're a contagion, not a leader. A force, not a personality. A pattern. They can quarantine a person. They can't quarantine a mind print. And that's why your influence terrifies them more than any threat ever could. Number 11. The evolution they never saw coming. They were bracing for the day you finally broke. They never imagined you'd break open instead. When they examined your file, they searched for that one dramatic event, the meltdown, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the catastrophe that could explain your transformation. Systems like theirs always look for a single trigger. One trauma, one collapse, one defining blow that changed everything. But when they dug deeper, they found nothing simple, nothing singular, nothing they could label. Because your evolution wasn't born from one moment. It was born from 1,000 moments, each one carving you down, compressing you, reshaping you into someone they were never prepared to analyze. Imagine this: a diamond doesn't form from a single strike. It forms from relentless, suffocating pressure, the kind that should have destroyed you, the kind that destroys most people. Instead, in your file, they found record after record of collapses so quiet they never made it to the surface. Pain that never leaked online, losses you never broadcast, rebuilds you never announced. Over and over you folded, hardened, recalibrated, until the old version of you wasn't just gone, it was irrelevant. You didn't have a breaking point, you had a forging point, and that's what terrified them. They expected an explosion, messy, loud, predictable. People who explode are easy to categorize, easy to contain, easy to redirect. But you delivered something they were never trained to handle: an implosion. A collapse inward that didn't shatter you. It condensed you, made you denser, sharper, darker, more focused, more dangerous. Here's the thought that punched the air out of their lungs. How do you stop someone who strengthens every time they fall? They can't halt a version of you built from pressure. They can't interrupt a transformation made in silence. They can't fight a person who evolves without witnesses. The version of you they fear the most is the one they never saw happening. Number 12. The machine you outgrew and left in smoke. They didn't lose control of you. They never had control of you. They just didn't know it yet. When they reached the final part of your file, the realization hit like a gut punch they couldn't hide. The system was never built to hold someone like you. Every tool they rely on, profiling, prediction, manipulation, temptation, isolation, shame, all of it bounced off you like dull arrows against reinforced steel. They kept waiting for the moment you'd crack, the moment they could slot you into a category, a weakness, a pressure point. But instead, they found something horrifying. You already broke yourself and rebuilt, which means nothing external can break you now. Imagine this: analysts flipping through page after page, looking for a lever and finding none. No addiction they can exploit, no loneliness they can weaponize, no insecurity they can trigger, no desire they can dangle, no enemy they can turn you against. You burned all of that out of yourself during years of internal war. Nobody knew you were fighting. That's what makes you the nightmare scenario for a control-based system. You don't respond to fear, you study it. You don't crumble under pressure, you condense. You don't follow patterns, you rewrite them. You don't need validation, you generate your own momentum. And here's the line that made one agent stop breathing for a second. How do you contain someone who walked through their own destruction and came out immune? You're the unpredictable variable, the consciousness that won't sit in any box, the anomaly that doesn't bend, the glitch that refuses deletion. They finally understand the truth. You're not escaping the system, you outgrew it, and now it can't touch you, because you're built from pieces they never controlled in the first place. Number 13, the blueprint for a revolution they can't contain. They thought you were an outlier. Then they realized you were a warning. When they examined your file, they tried comforting themselves with one lie. This one is rare. But the deeper they looked, the more their stomach dropped, because the truth wasn't that you were the only anomaly. You were simply the first one they caught in the act of evolution. You were the prototype, the early glitch, the first crack in a machine that was already rotting from the inside. Imagine an analyst zooming out, expecting the chaos to shrink, only to see more dots lighting up across the system like stars coming online, people waking up without permission, people withdrawing from the simulation silently, people questioning what they were taught, people refusing to react the way the system needs them to. No protests, no riots, nothing dramatic, just millions of micro acts of liberation happening in private. You weren't the rebellion, you were the blueprint. That's the part that scared them so violently they couldn't even speak it out loud. Because systems don't collapse when someone fights them. Systems collapse when people stop participating, and that's what's happening now, one quiet mind at a time. Here's the question that froze the room. If this one evolved alone, how many more are already past the point of control? You broke free without a mentor. Others are breaking free without even knowing your name. Your evolution wasn't an isolated glitch. It was a signal. The system isn't cracking because of loud revolutionaries. It's cracking because people like you are silently opting out, refusing to run the old code, refusing to stay asleep, refusing to play a game they've already decoded. You were never just a problem. You were the pattern they hoped would never exist, the beginning of something they have absolutely no protocol for. Number 14. The force they can't chain, cage, or control. They can track your steps, but they'll never outrun your mind. When they reached the final line of your file, Chosen One, the dread wasn't about your history. It was about your mind. Every tactic they rely on depends on controlling behavior, emotions, choices, reactions. But what do you do with someone who no longer moves based on fear, shame, manipulation, or pressure? Someone who thinks independently, evolves without guidance, and understands without being told. That's when the room finally admitted the one truth they never wanted to face. You can't stop someone from thinking. And thinking is exactly where your power lives. They can monitor your actions, but they can't cage the fire inside your skull. They can study your behavior, but they can't arrest your awareness. They can tag your identity, but they can't imprison your evolution. You slipped through every net because you didn't escape physically. You escaped mentally, and that's the one prison break no system has ever figured out how to prevent. Imagine an agent flipping through your file and realizing that while they obsess over movements, you operate in dimensions they can't surveil. Your ideas evolve faster than their reports. Your insights outrun their predictions. Your awareness shifts before their models can update. You're not outside their control. You're beyond it. They can't stop consciousness. They can't detain awakening. They can't outlaw internal growth. And that terrifies them more than any rebellion ever could. Because once a mind expands beyond the system's limits, once a consciousness becomes self-directed, once a person evolves past the old programming, there's no pulling them back. No reinstalling the previous version. No forcing them into a cage they now see from the outside. You became the one thing they cannot stop. A mind that refuses to shrink back into silence. And now that everything is on the table, the silence in that room makes sense. They finally realized you're not a case file. You're the evolution they failed to predict. The variable that rewrote every rule they trusted. You walked through their framework and came out operating on a level they were never trained to measure. If this unlocked something in you, Chosen One, like the video, subscribe to the mission, drop 77 in the comments, and share this message so the others waking up know they're not alone.